There are still seats available in the center part of the auditorium. Feel free to climb over everybody's laps and get to them if you need to. We're going to get started momentarily. Please get to your seats. He's not looking at me. Okay, I will. All right, welcome. My name is Connie Kotke. I live in Saddlebrook HOA 1, and I've been down here for about 4 years, last couple of years full-time. And I've been a longtime master gardener and very interested in the plants that we should have in our yards that are the low water or the native plants. And so when I joined the Saddlebrook Public Affairs Commission, the first thing that the leader said to me is, "Would you like to work on something around water?" And I said, "Absolutely." So the Saddlebrook Public Affairs Commission is a group of about 10 folks with representatives from HOA 1 and HOA 2. That's why it's called a commission and not a committee. And we get together on a monthly basis and we look at issues that are going on outside of Saddlebrook that can affect our quality of life. So a couple of months ago, we had Trico in here to talk about the electric situation, and we're very, very pleased to bring you a presentation about water, the groundwater right beneath our feet, right here in Saddlebrook, all the way out to the Tucson area and more of the state area, so that we're kind of starting small and working our way up. I do want to recognize Greg Keene, I think he's in the room. Greg, are you here? He's way in the back. Greg helped me a lot in pulling this together. And we will also want to thank up front all of our speakers, our panel that has joined us today here. This is extremely generous of them to come and share their information and their time with us this afternoon. So I hope that we will all appreciate and be grateful for the knowledge that they share, because knowledge is power. Knowledge and information and transparency gives us all what we need to take care of this precious resource that we call our drinking water. And so we're going to learn a lot today about what the situation is currently, what we're looking at coming up in the future, and what we as homeowners can do to help conserve. So, with that, the Public Affairs Commission, we encourage you to take a look at perhaps joining us, either on some project like water, or on some of the other things we're working on, like Firewise, relationships with Oro Valley, and the economic development that's going on down there. So we're really looking at a lot of different situations, and it's fun and interesting work, and that's why I joined. So why focus on water? First of all, you all know we have a new provider, a new utility for Saddlebrook, and that is JW Water, and we're thrilled to welcome some representatives from this new utility to come and speak to us about the infrastructure we have today and the investments that they will be making as we go forward. And the burning question that many of you have, what's going to happen to my rates? We also know that our area of the state is in what's called serious drought. Some of the western parts of Arizona are what we call extreme drought, and that extreme drought is creeping our way. So we have to recognize the impacts of warmer temperatures, lesser rainfall, all of the other things that Mother Nature is sending our way that can change the dynamics of the water that we use. So it's an important and appropriate time for us to take a look at what we know today and what might be coming down the future. And then, of course, at the regulatory level, we have different things going on in the state legislature, at the federal level, whether it's multiple states battling over Colorado River water and who's going to get how much, and all of the other things that current and future developers need to do, all of the hoops they need to jump through in order to determine that there is sufficient water to build new homes and buildings. So we're going to look at all of that today. Oops. Okay. Sorry about that. Nope. We're back to the beginning. Here we go. All right, so to start out, we have representatives from JW Water, Jill Schwartz and Trevor Edwards. Jill is the Vice President of Rates and Regulation for JW Water Holdings, which is the parent company for the water and sewer companies that provide services here in Saddlebrook. Jill joined JW Water in December 2024 after spending nearly 10 years working for Liberty Utilities, another regulated utility company that provides electric, natural gas, water, and sewer service to over 1 million customers. Jill works closely with all JW Water companies to ensure they are compliant with the Arizona Corporation Commission, or ACC, Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, or ADEQ, and other regulatory agency rules and regulations. Jill and her team are responsible for the management and oversight of regulatory proceedings before the ACC. Currently, she and her family reside in Southwest Missouri and look forward to relocating in Arizona in 2026. Our second speaker from JW Water is Trevor Edwards, and he's the utility coordinator for Lago del Oro Water Company. He joined the company in 2021 after previously serving as Special Programs Coordinator for the Pima County Attorney's Office in Tucson, Arizona. Trevor works with state and federal agencies like ADEQ and the EPA to make sure utilities are compliant with current and evolving rules and regulations. He also works closely with the general manager and superintendents to facilitate the flow of utility projects. Trevor graduated with a BS in Public Administration from Northern Arizona University and is raising two beautiful daughters with his wife, Brenda. So please join me in welcoming Jill and Trevor to the Desert View stage. I'm afraid we're going to have to do this. Yeah. What is that? Okay.
Thank you, Connie. All right, on behalf of JW Water, Trevor and I are very happy to have been invited here today and to meet with all of you. As Connie mentioned, JW Water is a utility holding company that owns and operates 18 different water and sewer utility companies across Arizona, providing service to over 50,000 Arizonians, including the water and sewer systems that serve all of you. Our water and sewer utilities are regulated by the Arizona Corporation Commission, the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, and Arizona Department of Water Resources. As she said in the introduction, my name is Jill Schwartz, and I'm the Vice President of Rates and Regulatory Affairs for all of JW Water. I'm based out of our Phoenix office, along with several other members of the JW Water team, including Kevin Barley, who's our Vice President of Operations and is here today as well. But there's a really great team of JW Water employees that are here in your community and dedicated to the day-to-day operations for all of you. You may know or recognize some of these guys if you've ever stopped by the office over by the pickleball courts or seen them out on different job sites. Ed McMeans is the general manager for the water and sewer systems that provide service to you, as well as a few of the other JW systems. He's supported by Trevor Edwards, who you'll hear from shortly. Joe Brannon and Ed Baker are also superintendents that work for Ed and support Trevor and the systems that provide service to all of you guys. So earlier this year, you should have received a letter from JW Water informing you in the change of ownership. In November 2024, JW Water acquired 8 water and sewer utility systems from the Robeson communities, including Lago del Oro, the water service company here, and Saddlebrook, the wastewater sewer provider. Robeson's core business was in the development of residential communities like Saddlebrook, not owning and operating water and sewer utility systems. JW Water does one thing. We own and operate water and sewer utility companies. That's our sole focus. In a highly regulated and capital-intensive industry, JW Water is focused on the necessary infrastructure investments to ensure the long-term sustainability and reliability of the services that we provide to you. Trevor will talk a little bit more about these planned investments in just a bit. So the burning question that everyone wants to know for sure is, when will my rates increase? I get that a lot. And the short answer and the honest answer is, we don't know for sure yet. We're in the process of reviewing all of our systems, their current rates, their costs, their cost structures, and the necessary investments for each of the different systems so that we can time requested rate increases appropriately. So your water rates for the Lago del Oro system were set over 10 years ago. So it is something that we're taking a look at. We also have an order from the Arizona Corporation Commission to file a rate case for that particular water system by the end of the year. So it is, again, definitely something that's being a look at, but there isn't an application on file yet. These applications, once they are filed with the commission, they require that we notify customers. So when an application is prepared, if you don't hear from us before that we plan to file one, there will be a requirement from the Arizona Corporation Commission that we notify all of you with the details of any application that's put forth. And then that process generally takes about a year to go through. So it's not something that happens, overnight and without a significant review and due diligence by the company while we prepare it, but then also the commission and their staff to make sure that the investments are in the ground, everything has been incurred prudently, reasonably, responsibly, and the service that we're providing to you meets their standards, their requirements, and then they'll help determine what an appropriate level of an increase is for the system. But again, that takes about 12 months. The letter that you'll get when an application is filed will also have information with websites and phone numbers or email addresses, ways that you can contact the commission if you want to make a comment or provide a comment about service or a requested increase.
I'm very sorry to interrupt the presentation, but we've got way too many people in the room. It's a fire hazard, and I have to ask anybody that's standing or on the steps, you have to exit.
Well, there's
The whole presentation is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it online. So, yeah, if you want to find an empty seat, that's fine, but if you can't, then you need to exit the building, please. Yeah, there's a number of seats right here in the middle. You might have to climb over people, but this is not okay. Yeah, thank you. If you have a seat next to you, then raise your hand and help people find them. There's several down here, folks. There's lots of seats down here in the middle. Still more seats down here, folks. But again, it'll be available online on our website within a 24 hours or so. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We want everybody to be safe.
We got a call. Yeah. Plenty more seats down here, folks. We appreciate you. Thank you. We want to be safe. There's one right down here in the very front row. Yeah, there's 3 in a row right over here. Couple more, couple of more. So we got to start selling tickets to these things. Okay, really appreciate you doing that. We all want to be safe, and we can continue the presentation now. Thank you.
All right, so that was about the end of my slides anyway. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Trevor, who's going to talk more about the planned investments, water accessibility and quality, and the system operations.
Thank you. Hello. I'm kind of tall. So I like icebreakers, and I thought you guys should know. When they picked me to speak at this, my boss said, I've been in one of these before, it's a small crowd. We are literally pushing people out of the building. Not nerve-wracking. I don't have 30 years of experience under my belt. I'm not an expert like these guys who I feel are going to have a lot to share. But what I will share, I came from working in the field of criminal justice. I wore the Scruff McGruff costume, and I helped kids get through the courts when they had made a mistake. I found this opportunity, and I was very interested in it because water is the universal symbol of life, and I can see that you guys take that serious too. Obviously, there's a lot of you guys in here that are interested in our current situation and where it's going, and I'm sure you'll have some really good questions at the end. So please save them, and I'll give you the best that I know. And I work right here in Saddlebrook. I'm not at the corporate office. I've probably taken your guys' calls many times on different issues. So I know a little bit of everything because I'm involved with a little bit of everything, and I'll do my best to give you guys the information you're looking for. So let's talk about what we're going to invest in, right? If they're going to raise the rates, I'm sure you guys want to know why and what we're going to be spending that money on. The first thing is automated meter reading. And if you guys aren't familiar with what that is, right now you probably see our meter readers in their bright green shirts going around the community every month reading your water meters. It is hazardous. You know, you guys probably aren't strangers to the fact that there's rattlesnakes and everything else that live in those boxes, and we've had to deal with that from time to time, and if we could, we'd like to get away from that. And one of the benefits of this new company coming in is they're going to fund us the ability to replace those old water meters with better technology, the technology that lets us drive throughout the community and collect meter reads, but also monitor your guys' usage from a computer and give you guys more accurate information, such as when you may have a leak. They're also better at picking up low, medium, and high flows, whereas the current meters might not do that. It all adds up to water conservation, which is the main goal when you're living out here in the desert. So again, if any of this, if I'm not too clear on a lot of it, I am open to explain more if you guys even want to catch me after the presentation or by email. But I'm going to move on from that and talk about replacing poly service lines. So ideally, we would like to have the whole community where your service lines are copper, they're not poly. Right now, poly gets old quicker than copper. It does break, and even if it's our service line, if we have a break that affects you in one way or another, because water's got to be cut until the services are restored. And it happens very often. It won't happen as often if we have copper services, so that's another short-term investment, something that we're looking to do right away. We also have inoperable water valves. Those are those things in the street. You sometimes drive over a lid that says water on it. Those are the valves that we rely on when we have to repair a main line. If you guys see water flowing down the street, you're great about calling it in, and we try to get out there and fix it as soon as possible. But to do that, we need good working water valves. Say that 10 times fast. And the fact is, our system's old. That's why the rates are cheap right now. So part of those investments is going to be replacing the ones that don't work and putting more in so that when we do have to shut off a valve, there's less of people affected by the outage. Another thing, we found that there's a great need to add automation to some of our wells. Most of our wells we can monitor in real time all the time. We can see if something happens right away, if a well goes down, if there's anything that might not be something that we want to see that's not good for the system. Generally, we can see that right away, but we do have some wells that require that automation that don't have it yet. It's very expensive, and in the meantime, it requires us to go out and check the wells very often, and we'll just be in a much better place for everybody if we can automate those. So that's another investment we look to make. Backup power generation. So right now, we get power outages all the time, it seems like, especially in the summertime or when we do get a good monsoons. And if power gets knocked out to one of our water plants, that's bad news for everybody. So we do have backup generators, but they are old, and they're another thing that's really expensive. So That was one of our big needs that we're looking at replacing our old generators, or the ones that are so old you can't get parts for them anymore. We have a backup plan for everything, but that's where we see a good need, something that we can address in the short term. Our long-term goals, again, we mentioned that this is an old system. That's why we get pretty frequent mainline breaks. And if you don't know, that's the main water line that carries water throughout the distribution system. And in a perfect world, that line would never break and nobody would ever have to have water cut off when they're in the middle of a shower. So ideally, we would like to loop our main lines. Right now, we have a very well interconnected system. When Robeson came in with his engineering team, they designed the system very well. If we have a well go down, generally we can support it with another well. The system's looped and connected in many ways that if something goes down, we have an answer right away. We can keep providing water. But there are a lot of lines, a lot of older lines, especially when you're leaving the Saddlebrook community, that we do need to loop into the system, because there are parts that if we lose a well and it goes down, people are without water until we can get it back up. And if it's connected, that's not something that we have to worry about. So a big priority is investing in those main lines, the ones that are even old. We want to replace the dated ones, put newer, stronger lines in. I talked about the addition of water valves, and we want to improve our existing structures, whether that's our storage tanks, our chlorine buildings, our well sites. We would like those to be in top-notch condition. So that's a snapshot at what we look at investing in the short term and the long term. And now I'll talk about water accessibility and quality. So one of the functions of my job is to make sure that we're following the rules. Everything we do to provide safe drinking water has to do with following the rules that are outlined by the federal EPA. They tell us what we need to test for in the water. That information is shared with the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, and both of those agencies we report to regularly. We have to. And that's how you guys can know that we're providing safe drinking water. A lot of our customers don't know when they call in that we're required to release a report annually that tells you what we're testing for in the water, because that's what everybody wants to know. Well, what's in the water? What are you guys testing for? We like to be very transparent, and we want you guys to know what your water source is. We're 17 deep wells. We're all groundwater. We're not treating blended water or surface water. You guys are getting water right from the ground. And if you're ever curious to see what exactly we're testing for and you want more information about your water source, you can always go to our website. For you guys, it would be lagodelorowater.com. Or if you live up in the preserve, that'd be ridgeviewutility.com. And you guys will see that very detailed report. And sometimes our customers call in and ask for us to provide that report to them. We can mail it to you, or you can come right into our office and we'll print it out and share that information with you. So our next bullet point here talks about our storage capacity. We don't have a 2.8 million gallon tank. That would be enormous, but collectively we do. We have a lot of storage tanks all over the community. Some of you guys might have driven past our water plants, and you'll see those big structures, but if we wanted to, if we needed to, if we wanted to fill up every single tank and hold on to a lot of water, we would have 2.8 million gallons of storage. So that's a fun statistic, a fun fact. Our next bullet point here, water use is monitored and governed by ADWR. So the Arizona Department of Water Resources, they see how much we pump annually, and they see how much we put back, right? They would like to see that whatever you're taking out, you're putting back in, and there's a lot of ways that we do that. By recharging the aquifer, that's putting treated effluent water back into ponds, letting it percolate over time, as well as being a member of CAGRD. It's one of the many acronyms we have, but it's an agency that we pay to recharge in different parts of our active management area if we're ever pumping too much and there needs to be more recharge. So we have our memberships, and we do report on what we're taking out of the ground and what we're putting back in, and that's one of the ways that we're constantly trying to make sure that we're not just taking everything out of the water table and leaving it dry, because a lot of you guys probably think, I just want to make sure I have water now the next 10, 20, 30 years, but we all care about the generations coming afterwards, and people continue to live out here, and we want to make sure that they all have water. So that, again, I might not have the 30 years of experience, but I do have kids, and we do plan to live here for a while, so that's an interest that I genuinely take as well. I've had a lot of customers come up and say, you can see some of your well data on the Arizona Department of Water Resources website, but it's not public what our water levels are. We just took our water levels in 2024 that will be public on ADWR's website coming up soon if they're not already. And there has not been a significant change in the water levels in a very long time, especially a change that would be concerning as of now. That's good news for now, and we just hope that we can keep it that way. I know you guys are all thinking we didn't get any rain, barely. We didn't even get any snow recently. That sucks, it does, because we rely on the water runoff from the mountains around us to naturally recharge this table. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, but it is something that we're required to do, just track and monitor what we're taking out, what we're putting back in. And I know you guys have experts here that are going to talk a lot more about that aquifer and what it looks like now. So I'll let you guys save any questions you have on that for the end. Here you can see, this is a nice little chart showing you the massive amount of water that's demanded on average daily. This is a lot of water, and something I'd like to point out about it, the steps that we take to make sure that everybody is doing their part in conserving water, we don't want to see water wasted. If you guys don't know, we monitor your water usage every month. We know what the average usage is for each home. Everybody's pretty consistent, but if we ever take a monthly meter reading and we see that your water usage doesn't look normal, that raises a red flag for us, and we automatically, it's a requirement, it's a law that we need to go out and do what we call a high-use inquiry. So when we do read your meter every month, we might make some mistakes. We are the water company, and I do thank you for leaving your pitchforks at the door, but we do try to catch it before you guys do. Nobody likes to get a really high bill and then later discover that they had a leak in their irrigation system. So we proactively run reports every month to see if water usage looks abnormal, and we will create what we call a work order so it's documented, and we have our technicians go out and look at things on the meter like a leak indicator. A lot of people sometimes will call in and they want to know, how do I read my meter? You know, what's on there? We're happy to go over that with you, but one of the nice tools on there is that you do have a leak indicator. We can work with you guys and see if anything on your property is drawing water when you're not demanding it, and that's an answer right away as to whether you might have a leak or not. And it's a free service. It's something to take advantage of. So if you guys ever get your bill and it looks high and you don't know why, you think you just need to call a plumber or somebody to come out and you got to spend that money, always start with your water company. We will come out and we will look for leaks. And am I running out of time? Okay, thank you. In gallons, that's right. Okay, I'm going to move on. Okay. Can you guys see that? Yeah, okay. So we do have 18 active wells. 11 are designated as assured and adequate water supply. I'm sure you guys are going to hear about that a little bit more as we move forward, but what that means is that we have 11 very deep wells to make sure that we can meet that 100-year assured water supply. Those wells range from 240 feet to 1,350 feet deep. They are deep wells. And if you're curious, these are some of our wells here, wells 14, 16, 17, 19, and 22. All of our water plants, when you drive around the community, do have the signs on them that let you know what well you're at, what water plant. So if you ever want to compare, that's one way of knowing where you're at. And then I really did my best. I know you guys wanted to see a map that showed all of the wells in the community, but that required a pretty big map. I had a little screen, so I took little segments of your guys' own map that you provide. And it's probably really hard to see even from where you're at, but if you get to see this recorded version or printout of this, you'll get to see some of our well locations. You can see well 22 is in this picture. You have well 19, and if you look real close, you can see what streets those are on, what holes they're near, and kind of get an idea. If you're curious as to where at in the community you guys can see these wells. So I won't spend too much time on pointing these out. I'm sure you guys know the streets around here a lot better than I do, but this is, if you guys wanted to use it as a tool, it's a good way of finding out where they're at if you wanted to go visit. So here's two more. Yeah, you got Unit 14, Unit 17. You can see, I wrote them in up there. My handwriting's not the best, but I think it is legible. So again, if you guys get a printout, you can look closer at these. And I'm just going to move on to the last part since I'm running out of time here. System safety and redundancy. So I talked about how we're interconnected. We are. It's a very good system. It was well designed, and we only plan to improve that. I always like to share that we're a member of a statewide mutual assistance program called AZ Warren. It's a great relationship to have, especially with where we're at. You guys saw the wildfires in Los Angeles. If we have a case like that out here, if our mountains are on fire and we can't provide enough water, we have a signed agreement between us and several other of our sister water utilities where we can get the support that we need. They pledge their support, and we can get the water and the resources in case of an emergency like that. And the last thing, we had to spend a lot of time building a very detailed emergency response plan that was required by the EPA back in 2021. So we put a lot of thought and great minds into addressing a cybersecurity attack or cross-contamination or a wildfire. We are prepared for it, and that's also, it's a plan that's public, so if you guys are ever curious as to how we would address that, that's something else that you could take a look at. That's the basic information I have before you get into the good stuff, but I do appreciate being here, and I'll look forward to answering any questions you guys might have at the end. Thank you.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Trevor. Wally Wilson joined the Metro Water District in 2017 as the Water Resources Manager. For the prior 14 years, he was a hydrologist and chief hydrologist at Tucson Water. Wally was on the technical and executive team for the Lower Santa Cruz River Basin Study in partnership with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. The study evaluated groundwater supply and demand imbalances in response to several climate and growth scenarios over a 60-year period. He'll share some of the results of that with us today. Wally graduated with a BS in geology from Sul Ross State University in 1985 and has over 35 years of experience as a water professional. For the last 21 years, he's had a progressive career in water resource development and planning, Arizona state water law and policy, recharge feasibility and facility design, and general water provider utility management. Please join me in welcoming Wally Wilson to the Desert View stage.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Couple of bylines. So what does a water resource manager do? Well, what I tell people is that I don't make water come out of the tap, I make sure there is water to come out of the tap. 50 years in the future. So that's kind of what I do for my district and what I did for Tucson Water as well. The other one is that I would offer you the red pill versus the blue pill, if you've ever seen The Matrix, but we don't have time for the red pill. We have time for the blue pill. So I'm going to give you some information about this study. This study was a large collaboration. It included the major partners was the Southern Arizona Water Users Association and the Bureau of Reclamation, but we had the minds in global climate modeling at the University of Arizona that worked on this. And we had the minds at the Central Arizona Project who developed the demand and supply scenarios that we worked with in this study. So this study, its purpose was to identify the physical water resources and the need for mitigating supply and demand imbalances, and developing strategies to improve the water reliability for municipal, industrial, and agricultural and environmental sectors. So where we started out was developing a series of scenarios. that we were going to look at the impacts to groundwater in the entire Tucson AMA. Now, the Tucson AMA is roughly Pima County and a little bit of Pinal County. So this is a large basin study. It's not a real focused study, but it had some very focused results, and we'll get into some of that. So we looked at climate scenarios on one axis here that is a best climate scenario, which has to do with CO2 emissions. And with the best one, CO2 emissions at some point starts to level off. And then there was the worst climate change scenario where basically CO2 emissions continue to climb throughout the study period. It's not the worst, it was the worst, because there are even more worse scenarios that we could have looked at. But we tried to book in something that was reasonable and look at what the climate impacts were. U of A scientists who are like ultra nerds, that's why I'm not going to get into this modeling, because they're super nerds, and climate modeling, they had to downscale these global models to look at just our basin, and we wanted to look at seasonality of precipitation events and how those would change into this 60-year period. So that was one axis of these scenarios. The other axis, there's two other axes. One was how rapidly will population grow in the AMA in Pima County? And the other component of that is where will that growth happen? Will it happen infill and stay concentrated around designated water providers, or is it going to just expand out to the limits and there's going to be lots of groundwater pumping outside of these designated areas, and that isn't or will require replenishment from the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District? So we came up with these 6 scenarios, and we went from B as the best up to F, which was the worst. And a lot of the work that we did after we did the modeling for all these scenarios was we focused on adaptive strategies for scenario F. Plan for the worst, see what kind of adaptive strategies we can come up with. So the ruler that we used was the Tucson AMA groundwater flow model. So this is a complicated 3-dimensional mathematical model. It was developed by the Department of Water Resources and incorporates many different inputs and outputs. So the major inputs are that we had some modeling turning knobs was stream infiltration. And stream infiltration is rainfall events that put water in the Cañada del Oro, and that water, some of that water recharges into the aquifer. So that's what stream water infiltration. So the climate models were used, those were then put into a hydrologic model that developed rainfall event information and predicted what stream flow and recharge would be in all of the stream courses throughout the AMA. Very complicated work, and the Bureau experts were doing all of this work for the stream flow stuff. Then there's artificial recharge, and that's the kind of stuff that's happening where CAP is being imported into the AMA, and it's being recharged in these large recharge projects like SAVSARP and CAVSARP for Tucson Water, and Lower Santa Cruz Replenishment Project that CAP is running up in Marana. Another one is incidental recharge, and incidental recharge is water that you put on your yards, and some of that component might make it to the aquifer. Most of it has to do with agricultural returns to the groundwater in the ag areas of Marana and down south in the FICO region. Outflows, well, pumping. That's the major outflow out of the model, is we're taking water out of the model because we're pumping water out of the ground. And the other one is evapotranspiration in riparian areas. We have a lot of riparian areas, even though there's not flowing water, we do have a lot of riparian areas that have shallow enough groundwater that is supporting pretty decent vegetative life, and that is evaporating and evapotranspiring. So those are the main inputs and outputs that we were manipulating in this study. So boil it all down, and this graph shows what the change in the overall aquifer storage capacity, well, storage, the amount of groundwater in the aquifer. And the black line there you see is back from the year 2000, or 1940 actually, and you can see that this whole region depended solely on groundwater up until the early 2000s, when CAP started coming in and was being recharged by Tucson Water and CAP in these large recharge projects. So you can see this turnaround in the early 2000s where the overall storage in the aquifer started to rise because more water was being imported and recharged than was being pumped out of the aquifer. Makes sense. All the other little colored lines are the individual traces for each of those modeled scenarios, from best to worst. And you can see that some up at the top there, the green line that's scenario B. That was our best scenario, which means slow growth and concentrated growth and the best climate that we modeled. Whereas the bottom line there, the red one, is rapid outward growth and the worst climate. So you can see the difference between how much the aquifer stored in between those two scenarios, looking out into the future. So now, this is what I call the money slide when we were doing this study, is what parts of that aquifer change do we have control over and we don't have control over? So you can see down there to the bottom right, that little portion of that aquifer change in storage has to do with our demand. That has to do with that rapid growth or slow growth, concentrated growth, or outward growth. The big chunk in green is the impact of climate change. So the big weight here in this study and the major impacts to future aquifer storage is climate related, which most of climate change is beyond our local influence. We can do certain things in our homes and we can do certain things with how many miles we drive our car, but this is a global issue. It's not something that Arizona or Pima County is going to have a great deal of impact worldwide. So this map shows water level changes for scenario F, that worst scenario. And where things are blue, that means it's good. Where things are red, that means it's predicting a water level decline through the life of this study out to 2060. The red dots over there in Abra Valley to the left side of the map, that's the big CAVSARP and SAVSARP recharge facilities, which were designed to put a lot of water in the ground and then recover it over time. So those aren't really what we're concerned with. What we're concerned with was these other 4 areas that are outlined there that are going to be problem areas into the future. It's predicted under this worst case scenario to be an area of water level decline of concern. And so we focused what adaptive strategies could be for those 4 areas. And here we're going to be talking about, what we called the CDO Saddlebrook, which is the upper arm of the groundwater basin and where groundwater aquifers can exist. So we came up with 3 focused adaptive strategies. Now these strategies only preliminary looked at costs, and they didn't look at whose water it was and if the water would have to be purchased. It was all these are adaptive strategies that could make a difference in water level changes that are predicted to happen in a worst case scenario in the Saddlebrook CDO area. One is to build a pipeline from the CAP pump station out there in Red Rock and build a pipeline all the way over here and recharge that water basically in the Cañada del Oro. You wouldn't have to construct a big recharge facility. The Cañada del Oro wash is highly transmissive and would be a great recharge in itself. And it would also create some riparian habitat and multi-use kind of features. Tens of millions of dollars for a pipeline. So these are, water projects of this scale are very expensive. And for all cases. Another one was to convey 10,000 acre-feet of reclaimed water, which at the time is the amount of water that flows past the Trico Bridge down in Marana and out into Pinal County of the water that has been used and treated and discharged into the Santa Cruz River. So that water is lost to all of us as those who are the customers and us who paid for that water resource to be brought into this region. It's flowing out of our control, and problem is that 10,000 acre-feet is going to be changing quite a bit. If Tucson Water ever builds its advanced water purification plant and starts using some of that for potable water, if more reclaimed water is pulled out and used for non-potable uses, replacing groundwater pumping. So all of that 10,000 acre-feet is probably a lot less than it was when we did the study. Last one was to construct a sub-regional water reclamation facility. There's already one up here. And to supplement the recharge in the Cañada del Oro with additional recharge from a wastewater reclamation facility that treats the water, and then it can be recharged back into the aquifer because it meets drinking water standards. Then there's some adaptive strategies that are more regional. And Tom's going to talk very specifically about this area, but some of these are fairly common sense things. Low water impact development. So how about rainwater harvesting? Capture the water that rains on your property and put it to use instead of using potable water for those uses. Stormwater detention projects where you can capture and slow down stormwater and get the benefit of that recharge, as well as you can develop multi-benefit features, parks, things like that, and some riparian habitat to bring wildlife back into areas that it's fairly barren. So that's an example of that is the Keno Environmental Restoration Project down by the baseball field, Chase, down there, the Keno Hospital area. And another one is upland restoration, where fires have done great havoc to the upland watersheds of the CDO. And going up and putting small retention basins and slowing the water down and developing the habitats and the kind of vegetation that slow down erosion, slow the water down, and encourage it to infiltrate into the aquifer are all very positive things and things that can be done. But they're broad scale. They're not one little project. Upland restoration is a lot of many small projects working in concert on a watershed scale. So, the results were temperatures are going to increase in all these scenarios. We're going to see longer dry periods with more intense precipitation events, and we've all experienced that over the past couple of years. It's already happening. The impact of climate on groundwater levels is a larger factor than development and growth. Demand is the major driver for localized drawdowns. There's 4 areas that are of concern. Those do have to do with localized groundwater pumpage demands. Many strategies are available. They can all be worked and used in concert with one another. And future work could include developing a suite of these adaptive strategies for these 4 areas of concern that are throughout the AMA. So we've been working on this report, we've been working on this study for over 8 years. It has been in the hands of the Bureau of Reclamation's policy review for almost 2.5 years. We're not real confident of when it will actually be published. However, on the webpage for the Bureau, you can look up Lower Santa Cruz River Basin Study, and Google will pop right up with a webpage where you can look at the technical papers that are associated with each of these groups. The climate modeling, there's a paper for that. the stormwater, from the climate model to the rainfall events to the stream infiltration. There's a paper on that, and there's a paper that Central Arizona Project did on the supply and demand, and how all that was calculated, and all the population numbers and all that. So there's some very, very nerdy technical papers that are on the webpage, but the overall report is still in the hands of the Bureau of Reclamation. So we're hopeful that I would say before January, we heard that it's going to come out in a couple of months. After January, we're not sure with what's going on with the Bureau. I was at a conference last week, just got back, and no Bureau people were allowed to attend because all travel had been shut down for the Bureau of Reclamation. So we're not sure when this will be posted, but we're looking forward to it, and thank you for your time, and we'll move on to Sharon.
Wow, that's lots of food for thought, isn't it? Whew. All right, our third speaker this afternoon is Sharon Megdal, PhD. She is director of the University of Arizona Water Resources Research Center, or WRRC. She holds a PhD in economics from Princeton University. In addition to her leadership role in WRRC, she's also a professor and a specialist in the Department of Environmental Science, C.W. and Modine Neely Endowed Professor, and Distinguished Outreach Professor. This is one busy lady, I'm here to tell you. Dr. Megdal focuses on water policy and management research, education, and engagement programs on a local and international basis. She's a published author and has won many distinguished awards over the years. She also served on many boards and commissions, including the Colorado River Basin Water and Tribes Initiative, the University of Arizona's Presidential Advisory Commission on the Future of Agriculture and Food Production in a Drying Climate, Arizona Governor Hobbs Water Policy Council, the Central Arizona Project, American Water Resources Association, International Arid Lands Consortium, and more. Let's welcome Dr. Megdal.
So thank you for that nice introduction. I think I'm out of time, so we'll go to questions. So watching the clock here, I think I'm going to kind of go through some slides really, really quickly and make some points that reinforce what you've heard both from JW Holdings and from Wally. This is a little odd because we went from the micro to the macro. And so what I titled my presentation was the context for local water provision and management. But I don't have time even for what is a typical professor talk of 50 minutes. And so Connie has the slides. I'm going to go through some of them quickly. They have pictures and so forth. But I want to make a couple of important points so that some of what you've heard may make some sense. So first of all, the Water Resources Research Center, we are part of Cooperative Extension in the University of Arizona, and our purpose really is to bridge the academic and non-academic communities and help people understand what is going on out there. So we're outward facing. We have lots of webinars, conference annually, and publications that are geared to the general public as opposed to some of the more scholarly type publications. We have a weekly wave that announces these things, and we hope that you would subscribe. We're in the old Boy Scouts building on Campbell Avenue, and the motto of the Boy Scouts is what? Be prepared, which is really good when it comes to water, right? So we're in a good building for us. I teach a graduate class in water policy, and you know, if there were ever an interesting story or maybe boring story of twists and turns, as Connie said, I got my degree in economics, and I didn't study ag or environmental economics, but I kind of fell into water, starting with when I was appointed on an interim basis to the Arizona Corporation Commission that Jill mentioned earlier. So that was my first real introduction. to water in Arizona, and that is looking at the private water companies and regulation of all the privately owned utilities. And then in the early 90s, I became the executive director of a regional water augmentation district that does not anymore exist. It was only there for a couple of years, but it was those years that the assured water supply rules were being adopted. And we had meetings in that building. I wasn't connected to that building, but they hosted the meetings of this Santa Cruz Valley Water District when the Department of Water Resources was formulating these assured water supply rules that I'll talk about in a minute. And actually a key person in that was the water resources manager for Robeson Communities, and their lawyer at Fenimore Craig really had a lot to do with figuring out how does a region like this here, a beautiful area, grow when you don't have access to renewable supplies, when you're in an area where the management goal is to not overdraw your aquifer. And so a lot of the formation of these rules that we're dealing with now were very much influenced by Robeson and their developments. But it's a whole long story, and I'm not obviously going to go into it, but what you see in terms of water policy and management depends upon many of these factors that I've listed here, and the legal and who makes the decisions are important, as are the values. And we're a growing state, and the state has tried to facilitate that growth over time. The water cycle context is important. The geographical and jurisdictional context is important. You're not directly utilizing water delivered from the Colorado River through the Central Arizona Project, but you are in a way dependent on that because that replenishment that Trevor talked about earlier by this thing called the CAGRD, and he didn't say what it stood for because maybe he forgot, but I don't mean to. It's the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District, and that got formed to help deal with this imbalance that Wally talked about earlier, that you're pumping groundwater, but the rules and regulations of the state require that that be replenished, and the Central Arizona Project water has been used for that replenishment. But now let's go to Wally and what he talked about with climate. The climate is really affecting our ability to have Central Arizona Project water delivered. So here's the Colorado River Basin, 7 states, the Republic of Mexico. You've got 30 tribal nations in there, so that map on the right shows how things look for them. We have these big water problems that are sometimes referred to as wicked water problems. And 2 of the big ones are the imbalance of water supply and demand, the Colorado River in particular, that does affect even you here because it affects your replenishment water, and the whole issue of groundwater is invisibility and overdraft. And the thing is, that picture, Wally, which I took at SAVSARP doing one of the class field trips that Wally used to help lead for us when he was at Tucson Water, and we had the water. It was always exciting when he had the water come in where it was dry and you could take a picture like this. Well, we can't see what's underground. I kind of turned a picture that was sideways this way. We can't see there, so that's why we have these mathematical models and satellite images and everything trying to figure out just what is happening under the ground. And because of that, there's a lot we don't know, there's a lot we are trying to know, and that requires a lot of work together, and those nerds from the university are part of that interdisciplinary work that helps that come about. So here's the Arizona water supply situation overall. The upper left shows the breakdown of the water supply serving the state on average, and you can see about 1/3 Colorado River water, 40% or so groundwater. On the bottom right is how it's used statewide, so almost 3/4 going to agriculture, municipal use, which tends to be the growing use at 22%, and industrial things like electricity generation, mining, sand and gravel, and that sort of thing. But those are averages for the state. And the purpose of these slides here is just to show that the situation varies across the state considerably and by region considerably. So you just can't make gross generalizations, which is why a forum like this is really helpful, so that people in a particular area can learn about what's going on under their ground as opposed to somewhere else. Oops, I went the wrong way. So this is where I want to really focus for a few minutes in this Arizona regulatory context. In 1980, Arizona passed the Groundwater Management Act, a really progressive, forward-looking act that requires in these active management areas that development have a 100-year assured water supply. This was to basically counteract some of the dry land deals that were done by land swindlers, in the 50s, 60s, and also in recognition of the rapid growth in the state and that we were relying on groundwater that was diminishing over time, not being replenished by nature as it was being used. So these active management areas were created, and there are now 7 now. It's changing by the year. But the important thing is that these areas are defined or delineated by hydrologic boundaries by and large. So now I was looking at the map. It looks to me like some of Saddlebrook is actually in Pima County and most of it's in Pinal County. It's all in Pinal, which is what I thought. But then when I was looking at a map, maps are not always easy so it's all in Pinal. So you live in Pinal, which is what I thought, but you're in the Tucson active management area. And that can be confusing because there's also a Pinal active management area. And the two active management areas, or AMAs, have very different management goals. In the Tucson AMA, it's to balance groundwater withdrawals with natural or artificial recharge. You want to get into balance. In the Pinal, it's quite different. And that's why Connie, I don't know what you ever did with the county fact sheets, but our water center has been putting out fact sheets by county, and the information about Pinal County might not be that relevant to you because you're in the Tucson AMA. Much like Apache Junction, which is also in Pinal, is in the Phoenix AMA. So it's really determined by groundwater basins. And so what's required by this were conservation programs, it quantified groundwater use, but that assured water supply, that consumer protection, was just a cornerstone of the Groundwater Management Act. So what does the assured water supply requirements require? By the way, that's a picture of one of those large recharge projects that Wally mentioned. And Wally, which one do you think that is? I won't lend you, it's Pima Mine Road. That looks like No, it's Pima Mine Road. It's actually down by Pima Mine Road to the south. But he was talking about some that are more to the northwest. It wasn't meant to be a trick question. It's just like, they look the same, right? They look the same. We have these big basins. We're delivering Colorado River water. By the way, in case you're wondering how much evaporates, not a lot. Wally can tell you about that. It's a good system that we've developed while Colorado River water is available. Sometimes more than's being used, we don't know what. But here's the key thing. The assured water supply requirements require legally, continuously, physically available water for 100 years for new development to be approved. Developments of more than 5 subdivided lots. You have to meet water quality standards. You have to have water use consistent with conservation regulations that are adopted by the Department of Water Resources. The water use has to be consistent with the AMA, the Active Management Area goal, which in this AMA is safe yield, again, not curtailing that overdraft. And then the renewable water supply can be direct or indirect. So it could be where you deliver that Colorado River water to a treatment plant like they do in Phoenix. They treat it and then they deliver it to the homes. It could be like Tucson Water has been doing it now for many years after a failed attempt at delivering it directly, where they deliver it to these recharge basins, let it infiltrate, and pump right from there and deliver it to the homes. I'm a Tucson Water customer. That's what's happening for me. For this area, you're pumping groundwater. There is replenishment that's occurring through the membership in the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District, but that replenishment is not occurring where the pumping's occurring. And that is allowed by law because this safe yield goal is an AMA-wide goal. So that's why you have to be watching what's going on with your water levels, what's going on with the sorts of things both of them talked about before now. And so this is really the story of you've got the water. It was shown to be physically, legally, continuously available, but you really do have to watch what's going on in terms of demand, in terms of pumping, in terms of water quality, in terms of what's happening due to climate. Here, again, I've covered, this is all stuff known to you and I've said, but this is a map that was pulled out of the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District plan of operation that's pending now. And Tucson is a mix of water providers that are older and what are called designated, and then Saddlebrook and some others, particularly to the south in the Green Valley area, are what's called certificated. I keep going to the wrong one. So as we focus on the problems, we know pretty well what the challenges are, even if it may be B or it may be D or it may be you plan for the F. You really have to think about what are the approaches, what are the robust policies to deal with these. And so here's a list of conservation, greater efficiency, rainwater and stormwater capture. This is what is being discussed all over, and there's really, I'm quite confident there's going to be adaptation, that we're going to figure this out. So the work continues. We have an annual water conference. This is a photo from last year's, which was held in March. Governor's Water Policy Council looking at kind of where there's some things where there can be improvements made. We have our upcoming conference, which has a focus on shared borders and shared waters. We have bookmarks, Ann here with me, if anybody's interested, but talking about how we're working at all different levels together in times of scarcity. So with that, I'm going to conclude and turn it back to Connie. But here's my email address. Please connect with us. And we have a lot of great materials on our website, so I invite you to visit. Thank you.
All right, so we've learned about our water utility. We have learned about studies that have been done in the whole Tucson AMA basin, and we recognize that Saddlebrook is one of the 4 areas of concern. And we also now have heard about some of the regulatory controls and the efforts that are being made both at the state level as well as the whole Southwest US level to try to mitigate some of this. So pulling groundwater is one thing. Capturing the rainwater and using that for other purposes is an entirely different thing that we, as homeowners, can control. So I am pleased to introduce Tom Brothen. He's retired from the University of Minnesota, where he taught psychology for 54 years, and is now Morse Alumni Distinguished Professor of Psychology Emeritus. Doesn't that sound academic? He and his wife, Beth, have been Saddlebrook snowbird residents since 2018. As they've settled in and made improvements to their property, Tom has put his interest in water conservation to use and will share just a couple of things that he's done in his own yard that we can think about doing as well. When he is finished, we will open it up for Q&A, so I hope you all stay for that. And I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
Well, it's pretty easy to think that, well, this is all out of our control, right? But there are things we can do, and things you've probably heard before. And think of water. I come from Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes, and so I have to have a different mindset here. So we can think of water differently here and act accordingly, I hope. And this is on the demand side that Wally was talking about. You heard about low flow faucets and shower heads and toilets and hot water recirculating pumps so you don't wait forever. Robeson had this wonderful design where the hot water heater is way over in that corner and the shower is in the other corner. So, yeah, hot water circulating pumps take care of that. I've done that. Point of use hot water heaters. Our kitchen for example, is the farthest faucet away from the water heater. Well, have a point of use water heater. That helps. I was very interested to hear about water meters. I have some terrible stories to tell about water leaks, and being a snowbird, finally last year I installed my own Wi-Fi water meter, and maybe you guys will take care of that and make this unnecessary. Maintain your irrigation system. There's a guy in our neighborhood who has one's leaking down the street. Your watering schedule, do you need this much water in the wintertime? The master gardeners are good about helping us with that. And there are lots of resources on the University of Arizona website. Desert landscaping, well, what's that? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about, on desert landscaping and watering too, it's important to know what your soil conditions are. Our yard ranges from gravel to concrete, and as you know about what we have down here. Well, how about rainwater? Here's the Saddlebrook watershed, courtesy of Google Earth. It's about 4,000 acres. And if you can see that, you can see that's basically the water comes down and on and through Saddlebrook. If you get 12 inches a year of rain, which is starting to look a little dicey right now, I had in my gauge 16 3/4 inches in the 2024, but I'm wondering about this year. But if you get an average year, if you think about it, that's about more than a billion gallons that falls on or through Saddlebrook. And I'm interested in doing the numbers on the graph that we saw earlier about how much water use now. But in 2019, Lago del Oro pumped about 2/3 of that for our use. So in other words, we're dealing with a lot of water that comes down on us. And so the question sort of is, how can we keep, for our use, more of it? Well, here's the Canada del Oro after a rain. And just as what goes on around Saddlebrook, much of it comes, and there it goes, heading south. I did some little back of the envelope calculations, and just in that section that it looked like, we're looking at about 120,000 gallons that was on its way south. Some of that goes in, obviously, but what am I doing?
I don't know.
Uh-oh. Whoa. Did it show my video? I hope it did. Whoa. Well, anyway.
What do we got going on here?
Working on it. All right. I don't think I did anything. I think it was. Well, from the police coming and clearing the place out to technical glitches. Well, what I was going to show you is the Canada del Oro.
Grab the mic.
The mic still works.
Mic still works, yeah. I was going to show you the Canada del Oro after a rain, and it's just well set for recharge because it's just sand. And as Wally was saying, that'd be a good place to put some water to have it go into the water table. So did this thing totally die or what?
Yeah, it sure did.
Okay.
Oh, it's your computer is dead too. There we go.
You got it? Oh, wait a minute. We're going to have to go through the whole thing?
Nope. You should be there in just a second. I think this thing overheated.
It overheated. Ooh.
Oh, there we go.
I didn't know my slides were that intense.
Yeah, it's connected.
It's linking. All right. Well, we're going to go really fast through the rest of them to get to questions. I can see it here. I know that. I could turn the laptop around and everybody could look at it. Yeah. Hoo-dee-doo-doo-doo. Or not.
Or not.
Hey,
No.
something.
What is that?
That wasn't one of my slides. Okay. I can say, that's me down there, yeah? Okay, that's where I want to go. Yeah, that's it. That was it.
I don't even know where that's coming from. That's not your computer.
No.
That's not even her computer. So,
That's where I want to be.
You need to speak to your slides.
Yeah, I know,
Well-
he's trying it, but that one's,
All right. Well,
Use the mic.
use the mic.
okay.
We'll go fix it up in the room.
Okay, well, anyway, I was going to show a map. I was going to show the Canada del Oro, nice and dry, then the Saddlebrook water outlets where the water goes. Our system here, and you've probably seen them if you drive around, you see these large concrete channels where the water goes. Our system is designed to handle big rain events, monsoon season. And in a 1-inch rain, for example, 1,200 gallons comes off your roof. And as you know, it mostly goes into the street and goes down the street and goes into these large concrete sluices and then heads south out into the desert. Well, there are examples of nice, better channeling, like right out here along Clubhouse Drive. But most of them are pretty well eroded ditches that head out. So the idea is to save more of our water, find ways to save it. Starts up in the mountains in the Catalinas, slow it down, as Wally was talking about, and we can put rainwater to use on our own property. And I was going to show slides of rainwater storage. We have HOA guidelines now that are new where people can put in water tanks to capture and store water. There are landscaping things you can do. I've done some landscaping changes whereby our old tired rock bed was converted into infiltration little ponds, if you will, and filled with rock so water infiltrates. And then plant watering using these $20 rainwater downspout diverters. I guess, without pictures, this this maybe doesn't make a lot of sense, but anyway, there are lots there are lots of things we can do, and I'd be glad to show people what I've done at least someday when we don't have slides to depend on. Thank you.
Boy, that takes pure grace to be able to stand up in front of a room full of people and just talk to non-existent slides. Tom is a wealth of information about what he's done in his own yard, and we do plan to have some more workshops, kind of hands-on workshops or demo workshops. We'll partner with the Master Gardeners and show people how to capture the rainwater, how to divert the runoff into your trees and into some of your shrubs and stuff to help save some of that too. So we'll do some more how-to things probably starting next fall. But meanwhile, I would like to open it up for questions. We have 2 microphones, and let's please form a line. And I will ask you out of courtesy to all of your fellow participants and to our speakers here, please have 1 question only. This is not a comment time. This is not a tell a story time. It is question time. So we can make sure that we respect their time as well. Ask 1 question. We'll get you the answer. You can go to the back of the line if you want to ask another one. There are forms out there also if you don't want to stay and you do have a question. Feel free to fill that out and leave that for us. And we will post this recording online as soon as we're able to, so we want to thank you for coming, but please, we welcome some questions.
I have time enough to thank the panel for giving us much more information that my aged brain cells can assimilate. But I would like to come back to rates. When you purchased this water supply business, you are a business. You've done a lot of calculations. You've done a lot of surveys. You know what your potential infrastructure costs are going to be, and yet you can't give us even a little rate spread as to what you're going to need to increase our rates in order to cover all of your new costs going forward. I mean, I submit that you know pretty well already what it is you're going to have to charge us in order to meet all of these requirements. So how about at least a spread?
Well, I do have 18 different systems that we're actively looking at, and we are honestly still in the process of going through our capital budget planning for 2025 and beyond. So we don't have all of those things determined and identified yet, but I would say if I had to guess, and this, please don't quote me, or I'm not putting it in writing, but based on previous costs that have been incurred, and I haven't gone back in many, many prior years, but looking at 23 and where we're sitting at for 24, I'd say, I mean, there's a maybe 40 to 50% increase is what I think it was looking like for some of these systems, but I could be confusing them with some of the other systems. But some of them are very significant because some of the rates have been in effect for a very long time, and there's a lot of investment that's already been made, but don't quote me to that for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else, sir? Oh, okay. Do you want to go to the microphone so others can hear you?
So that was my main thing, is the infrastructure, how much that's going to come to. It seems like a lot of piping, a lot of different things, which could be multi-millions of dollars, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so that would be quite an increase too, right? As far as the infrastructure to do all of that work.
Yeah, so that all gets taken into consideration, any investments that need to be made. And some of the investments that Trevor talked about are shorter term and some are longer term. So, mostly the numbers that I've looked at of what has already been put into service, what we think is coming in 2025, which may be some of the short-term things, but not all of the short-term things, and then certainly not necessarily the long-term investments. So when I say some of the systems are looking at a 40 to 50% increase, some of the other systems that we recently acquired are requiring more of an increase than that. And so it really just depends. The other thing that I would say that we're looking at where opportunities exist to consolidate and have larger base, like customer bases, to spread the costs and the increases across. Those are, not every situation is going to be ripe for that, but we're looking at those opportunities as well, because when we can share costs, then that helps bring down the impacts of certain investments and cost increases as well.
So you're not only talking a monthly rate, but you're also talking where you might have to come up with a $5,000 thing or whatever, big lump sum of money.
Yeah.
Is that maybe so?
No, we're talking about the monthly rates.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean, for the infrastructure, would you have to come up with, you guys say, well, $5,000 assessment or something like that? Is that?
No, they don't do that. No, they don't do that. Jill, I want to ask a question that I think might be enlightening to the audience, and I'll just ask it as a question. At the Corporation Commission, are they still going off historical test years?
Yes.
So the rate increases are not forward-looking based on investments that have not yet been made, but that you have to go off a test year and show the data for that test year. Is that right? So that's why some of that long-term stuff, that'll be a future rate increase, right?
Yes. Okay. I'll add to that. Yeah, that's a good point. So it is historical looking. The Corporation Commission is actually looking at a formula rate plan that utilities are allowed to propose for the commission to decide if it makes sense as a way to implement incremental increases. So the first rate case that we do will have to be a fully historical rate case that would likely result in a larger increase. But then they are giving utilities, they are now allowing utilities the opportunity to file and request formula rate plans that would ideally result in smaller incremental but likely annual increases. But they would be, more measured than we haven't had a rate increase for 20 years and now all of a sudden here comes the utility. So that's something that is also, we're looking at other utility companies across the state, and we're mostly watching them because we're, still a relatively small utility and putting together all of the capital investment plans needed to see if it makes sense for us to propose something like that and when it makes sense.
It's not low yet, but it's good.
And I'm a certified water operator, both potable and wastewater, and I'm integrally involved with Metro Water District, and I was with Tucson Water. And all of the things that Trevor talked about are things that water utilities do continuously all the time. They're always investing in main replacements, new infrastructure, rehabs on reservoirs, looping systems, all that. And, when you purchase a new system, you inherit what wasn't done by that previous owner. And so all utilities that expand their service areas into already being provided, they have to upgrade a lot of stuff because, the importance is reliability and water quality. And so those drive all of these investments, and all the ones that Trevor talked about. Metro Water is actively doing all of those things over time. So we have a really old system as well, and it's a continuing investment situation.
Excellent. We have a question over here.
Yes, not unsurprisingly here, my concern is also about the rates. And I also heard a very brief mention of the second water company in Saddlebrook, and that's the Ridgeview Water Company. Now, there has been a significant differential in rates between Lago del Oro and Ridgeview Water Company's rates. And I wondered if that's going to be taken into consideration when the new rates are planned.
So again, so we are looking at those two systems and whether or not it's something that makes sense, and is that an opportunity for us to consolidate? But we have to look at we're looking at each system individually today, and that's the way that we have to present it to the Corporation Commission as well. If we as a utility company think that there is an opportunity to consolidate the rates of different utilities, we have to show each of them on a standalone basis and then what it would look like if we consolidate. Because obviously when you consolidate, I hate to say it like this, but there are winners and losers, right? Like somebody's rates are going to go one way more than the other. And so it's something that we take very seriously. It is something that's on the table, but we don't have a definite, yes, we're going to propose it, or no, we're not. It's something that we're actively looking at right now.
Well, am I correct in assuming, though, that the water is all the same? I mean, Ridgeview, Lago del Oro, we're just using the same water. And it was really a pricing option, not a water use option thing. Is that correct?
Right, Trevor's nodding his head that the systems are interconnected. And so that's one reason from a regulatory perspective why we would make an argument that the systems are connected, the water is the same. It makes sense to have consolidated rates, but we do have to look at each system because they're technically separate systems, albeit interconnected, to see what the current rates for each system are before we put forth a proposal to officially consolidate the rates and have the same sets of rates.
Thank you.
Over here.
Dr. Benkel's slide showed, one of her slides showed 5% water availability from reclamation. If we were to make a determined effort to apply some of the technologies that
Yeah, so, so the interesting thing about that pie chart is that's looking at the whole state's water use and what percentage is coming from the different sources. So if you look at the whole of Arizona water use, which is estimated to be 7 million acre feet, where an acre foot is what, 628? 320, yeah, he got 325,000 gallons. So it's a lot of water. And what that's saying is of that, only 5%, and it used to be 3%, of that whole big pie is coming from reclaimed water. And that's an estimate. What's more important, I think, for this question is what percentage of the available water that we could reuse is being reused? And I don't know what the number is for Pima, for Pima County or the Tucson AMA, but the Phoenix AMA has said their number is close to 95 to 99%. They're reusing it for cooling Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station, for all kinds of irrigation, for some environmental restoration. So we've got to keep those two numbers separately, but clearly there's some that's being discharged that isn't being used. And as Wally pointed out in his conversation about what's going down beyond Trico Road, we get very territorial here, and we want to keep Tucson AMA water in the Tucson AMA and not let it flow to Pinal, because should they use our water, we're very territorial. And so things like the upgrade to the metropolitan wastewater treatment plants has changed the flow and what's going down across the county or AMA borderline. And then direct potable reuse, where you take it off the river and so forth, would be reusing more. And then it becomes local. So maybe Trevor or Jill can speak to what the potential is to reuse. And by the way, in 2007, I was one of 4 authors that wrote a paper about the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District and how it could meet its replenishment obligations over time. And that's an issue. It was a big issue then, got to be less of an issue. It's a bigger issue again now. One of the things is using the effluent locally, and not always for golf courses, not always for grass, but to actually replenish the aquifer. So there are things I just can't quantify, and I think Wally wanted to say something here, and maybe Jill or Trevor.
So one way to look at this is we call it the urban water cycle. So water is delivered either from a river or from groundwater to the home. It's used, it's treated, it's used, it's treated again, it's discharged, and it's a cycle. Well, where we're situated, the big metropolitan water reclamation facilities that are operated by Pima County, they discharge what is not directly used for reclaimed usage by Tucson Water and its customers and partners, that's going on to one-time consumptive use of that water. It's being taken out of the urban water cycle, and water that's flowing out of the county in the Santa Cruz River. But what's in the Santa Cruz River is recharging the aquifer. We are getting that resource and keeping it in the aquifer. So it's not going to waste when it gets put into the Santa Cruz River. It's becoming a resource that we all collectively paid for. You may not be getting CAP water directly, but you're paying the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District. So you're invested in water coming here and keeping it here in our AMA. So we're all invested in that water, and it would be best to keep it here. But when it comes to reclaimed water, in my opinion, we should shy away from these one-time consumptive uses for reclaimed water and look at ways to keep it in the urban water cycle so that it contributes beneficially to future potential potable uses as well. We want to keep green communities. We want to have parks. We want to have places for our children. Those are all very good things. We want to reduce the amount of greenhouse hot spots and urban heat situations. So a green community is good. Stormwater is a very good idea and good way to do that rather than using our reclaimed water that we've all paid a lot for, indirectly or directly. We want to keep reusing that water in an urban cycle.
Over here.
My question is for the slideless man at the end here. When we first came to Saddlebrook about 14 or 15 years ago, I understand the HOA rule was that we were not allowed to have rain barrels to catch the water from the roof because they wanted the water to recycle to use for the golf courses, and therefore we couldn't capture it. Has that rule has now changed, and we are allowed to capture the roof water in rain barrels?
Yeah, I was going to add a slide about that. There was, anyway, yeah, the HOA guidelines, ALC guidelines changed last year. In fact, it was a surprise to me because I had talked to Vivian about that, and my gosh, she got it done. So yeah, to go to the website, the ALC website, and I think it's page 35. I have it somewhere like that. Anyway, or 33 for HOA 1, and you'll find the guidelines for how large a tanks and all the rest of it. But one thing about the water storage like that, I think it's probably better if you're not a snowbird like me, because that's when most of the water would come. And so you'll have a tank of water there that normally you would use to water plants or flowers or whatever you want to do with it. But the water that, the argument would not be if it was for the golf courses, because the water goes down the street and out into the desert. It doesn't get to the golf course unless on a couple occasions it goes into maybe in the lakes, and then it's pumped to the golf courses. But that's, in one respect, that's wasted water that's just heading out to the desert, at least for our purposes.
So for those of us that are snowbirds then, is it not beneficial to have such a water system, but then to disconnect it for the summer?
Well, I'd say, in my opinion, now maybe people have different perspective on this, but in my opinion, the best way is to divert water down to your bushes, to store it on your property. I have these retention ponds, so to speak, and they're right next to a big oak tree, and it's...
Will you give demonstration lessons, please, sir?
We'll have, I understand workshops are coming, and
Good.
I'm happy
Thank
to be
you.
part
Thank
of
you.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this side.
I have one request, and that would be for the water company and the Saddlebrook people to publish on a regular basis what the entire water usage is for the Saddlebrook communities, to make people more aware of what is really going on with the water situation. I'm in favor of trying to recycle things. I have neighbors who routinely wash their sidewalks and even the street with a garden hose, things like that. People are not aware of the nature, the serious nature that we're dealing with. My water reclamation system is the fact that I have no gutters or downspouts on my house. The water runs off the roof. It stays in the yard in puddles for an hour or two, and that's it. It does its thing on its own. So try to keep it simple, but if we could maybe make some data available, say on a monthly basis or on a 6-month basis, publish it, maybe include it in the water bill statements that go out, so people would see that the water usage is going up, down, or staying the same.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trevor, do you want to just speak to that in terms of reporting and so on too?
Yeah, that's a fair request. I think that's something we can look into doing. It's public how much our water system uses annually, but specifying it down to the community of Saddlebrook, that's potentially an idea, something that we may be able to add to our website. Maybe something that, because I know how we can get those numbers, but making it public, I don't know how we could put that out there. I'm thinking of the website immediately, but it's certainly something I'll bring up.
I assume you know what the water usage is for the whole community, all the Saddlebrook communities. And to me, that would be, add 2-3 numbers together, and that would be it. Now, maybe it's not that simple, but...
It is. We have pretty good numbers that will tell you exactly what the community is using. So yeah, no, I will bring that up and see if there's a way that we could publicly report that.
Over here.
Yeah, normally my wife does the water bill payment, but this last month I had to peek at it and I saw that the bill is broken into, I'll call it 2 categories. One is a usage category and the other category would be probably for infrastructure and miscellaneous other fees and whatnots. So my question to you is the rate increase that you're referring to, is that going to primarily address the water usage portion of it or the infrastructure? Can you give us some color on how that rate would be apportioned across those different categories?
That's a great question. So normally when we go in for a distribution rate increase request, it affects both parts. So there's the monthly fixed charge that customers pay, whether or not they use any water or flush their toilet at all. It's a set fixed monthly customer charge. And then there's the commodity that's charged on a per gallon basis. And so in a lot of cases, those will increase. Like if it's a 10% increase request, then the company may propose to increase both components by 10%. Or we can look at different options. A lot of jurisdictions propose tiered rates, and so in order to support and promote conservation, they may look at higher second tiers. So you may have 1 tier today, or there may be 2 or 3 or 4 tiers. And when the tiers increase, that's usually that's a way that utility companies promote and encourage people to conserve and use less water. Because when you use the lower number of gallons, the rate is cheaper, and then as you use more and more, then the rate gets higher and higher. So we don't have any plans on what those rate increases will look like and what the rate design may be presented as in this case or in upcoming cases, but it is something that we do take a look at, and we try to get feedback from, from other groups as well too. We'll take a look at the water usage reports and see where the majority of the water is being used, if there's a need to increase one tier more than another.
Yeah. Almost all of the major water providers in the region and in the state use an increasing block rate where the more water you use, the more you pay for each of those gallons of water. Now, a good distinction, though, is that you're not paying for the water. You're paying for its delivery and its quality and its reliability. So none of us are paying for that gallon of water. We're paying actually for it to be all the costs associated with getting it in and having it come out of your tap. So, Metro Water has 4 tiers, and our base tier has an average volume of water included in that base tier. And as you use more than that, each tier costs a little bit more per cubic foot of water that you use. So that's a very common rate structure throughout this region. Very, very common for the major water providers.
I saw that we had a tier system with the Lago water system, but my water usage was a relatively small portion compared to the fixed charges.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Kind of like cable TV.
This is something that's looked at for all utilities. But quite honestly, when you have a utility, and I'm not here to talk to this one specifically, that's there to provide water on demand year-round, but some of you are not here year-round, they still have to get coverage of the cost. And so I don't know of a utility that doesn't have a basic service charge, but I can't say I've done a study. And as Wally pointed out, so much of the costs are fixed. So there's, when I was on the commission, they had never done increasing block pricing. We had a workshop on that. That was a long time ago. And so the commission, as a body, changes its approach to things over time, and as a company regulated by them, they do have to pay attention. So they may have what they'd like, but that doesn't mean necessarily the commission will approve either.
My question has to do with basically expansion in the area, assuming that we have a certain amount of water, and I understand the 100-year water, but what are the chances that our water will get diverted to other areas than the Tucson Water District? And what about growth of subdivisions within the Tucson Water District?
Well, on a large scale, it's illegal to pump groundwater from the Tucson AMA and send it to someplace else. So there's statutory limitations on the transport of groundwater. So now, it's unlikely that another utility would come up here and drill wells and build a pipeline down to their service area and pump groundwater here and move it, because the cost of transmission and the cost of that infrastructure is huge. So, moving water long distances is very expensive to construct and to operate. So it's really unlikely. The larger water providers to the south of here, we have CAP allocations. We have Colorado River water. Basically, we have water rights on the Colorado River. So even those may be curtailed in the near or far future, that is still a supply, and that is far more economically viable and acceptable to utilize that renewable supply than to be reaching out in great distances and pumping groundwater and transmitting it. So, and you have to have groundwater rights to be able to do that. And that's, there's a lot of statutory reasons, and there's huge economic reasons why it is unlikely that somebody's going to come and take your groundwater.
Can I just add something that I wish I would have said when the room was full and people were here? But going to the point of watering your sidewalk or street, you're a certificated area. So this groundwater replenishment district charges that we've been talking about, those show up on your property tax bill. And so you may all just look like I do. Oh, is it going up? Is it going down? What is it? Just got my assessed valuation from Pima County the other day. But there's a line item. It's not connected to your property value. It's connected to your water use as reported by the utility and through the whole ADWR and the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District. It's very layered. But it's not only on your water bill that you're getting charged for your water use. It's annually through your property tax bill as well. Take a look at that line. And I don't have it on my bill because I'm a customer of Tucson Water, and they're designated, so it's different. It's through my rates.
Oh, Tom's got something.
Oh, Tom, sorry. Yeah. Just a question, maybe Wally would say more about this, but as to other people using the water that we depend on, we are, my understanding is we are kind of at the top of the, if you want to call it, bathtub of the valley that's beneath us. And the water's going downhill, as water tends to do, and it's going that way, and if more is used there, less would be available here, and maybe Wally want to comment on that.
Yeah, you're sitting up here at the very lobe of the aquifer, and it is the edge of the water, groundwater boundary that makes up the AMA. So we're tucked up against, if you keep driving up north, suddenly you start diving down in towards San Manuel. Well, you crossed over that groundwater divide. So that high point up there is a groundwater divide, not just a surface water divide, but a groundwater divide. To jeopardize water that's underneath our feet right now, there would have to be significant development further north above you. Groundwater development to the south is not going to impact your water supplies because it's already down gradient of your water and that's being pumped right now. So a lot of development up there. The problem is that the higher up you go, the aquifer gets thinner and thinner because bedrock, you get to Oracle up there and it's all bedrock everywhere, where there's no aquifer there. not in any significant amount. A lot of their wells are in fractured bedrock, and they produce an amount, but not the kinds of volumes that the kinds of wells are that are down here in this alluvial package of aquifers. So it's unlikely that physically it would be difficult to do large groundwater-based development up gradient of this area because there's not a lot of groundwater and there's not a lot of aquifer that produces enough water to do large-scale development. So it's unlikely that that would be a scenario that would be a threat to the water here in the Saddlebrook area, just from hydrogeologic standpoint.
Over here.
Yeah, hi. I live in Unit 2, so our main water lines are the originals. I have a shut-off valve on my property that does not work. So when there are breaks, there's large paths of homes in our unit that get shut off. And I know there's more than one valve in our unit. So I appreciate seeing that you're going to invest. I know people are talking about rates, but you can't pay peanuts, and expect a quality product. So I'm actually glad to see that you're going to start putting money back into this community, because if we run out of water, and I did not like seeing the slide where we're in the red, because we've got houses that are of pretty high value hanging out here, and without water, those things are going to be worth very little money. So for me, I personally applaud the fact that you are going to invest. I know you're going to have to take some rate, but I want the value of my house to remain. I want to make sure that when the water gets shut off, it's not me and my 122 neighbors that can't take a shower at one time because all the valves have outdated and they're gone, is what's happened. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Woo-hoo. Over here, please.
Just wanted to thank you guys for all the work that you're doing for this valuable resource. Really appreciate it. And I think my question is for Wally. A lot of your slides around that study, which is an amazing study, and I'm looking forward to actually getting published, talked about the Central Arizona project, right, the water pipeline. And it almost seemed like an assumed resource to some degree. How much can we trust that assumption that that water is going to be here in the future? Because it seems like the Colorado River Basin is a very fragile resource in terms of the snowfall in Colorado and other places that it depends on. And do we have any contingency plans if that particular resource, dries up?
Because the Central Arizona Project supports 8 million people, 6 in the Maricopa area.
Well, no, the state only has 7.3 million.
Oh, okay, so let's call it 5 million people, roughly.
6 plus.
So that's a lot of voters. It's unlikely. Part of my job is planning, and I have done long-range plans for Metro Water District where I've looked at 30% and 40% reductions in the CAP, and that we're looking right now, and what is being conserved by the majority of CAP subcontractor municipalities. We're already foregoing about 30% of our supply to leave it in Lake Mead to conserve it. Some of that's being compensated and some of it is not. In my particular district, we have been looking at a 30 to 40% reduction. And we can manage that within our designation of assured supply. So in our particular case, that's not something, that much of a cut would not affect us that greatly, because we have designations of assured supply, and to me, that draws a line on a map that says that amount of water is for that. We're not going to grow our service areas and keep expanding so that we have to find new resources. So we're in the hunker down, and we are going to stay within the bounds of our designations, and that translates to a line on a map that here's the circle, and only what's in here is going to get that water, and only this much is going to grow because that's being limited by the amount of water. So with that 30 to 40% reduction, we're going to meet our designation requirements, and we have 3 systems that have designations of assured supply. So we're spread out a little bit, but that amount is not, but that may be different for other communities.
Yeah, so I would encourage you to go to the website for the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District. Just Google it and it'll come up. And look at their plan of operation, which they just submitted. Every 10 years, they have to come up with a plan of operation. They do a mid-plan review. I was on the Central Arizona Board for 12 years, and I chaired the committee that oversaw that for half the time I was on the board or so. But that will help explain kind of where some of the vulnerabilities are for CAGRD members, such as the Saddlebrook area where you're a certificated provider. You're not a water utility like Metro or Tucson Water where you have these allocations of Central Arizona Project water. You can plan for it, you can store for the future. And so they make a very good attempt to provide understandable but comprehensive information. And I think that's the best place to go to see, because they have to look at can we rely on for the next 20 years, and what about the 80 years after that? So they're always looking forward 100 years. So that would be my recommendation, to take a look at that. And then if you have questions, inquire of them, because they are very responsive.
Thank you.
Simple question in comparison. It's about filtration currently at the water plant or in the future. Is there any? And the reason I ask is I have a whole house particulate and carbon water filter, a 20 micron, and I change that every 25 to 30,000 gallons. And when I take that cartridge out, at the bottom of the housing is about 4 inches of red mud. So do you filter, or any plans for better filtration?
We chlorinate the water, and that's about it. If you have an issue like that and you call the water company, we'll come out with a technician and we'll help you figure out why you're getting that. So I would highly suggest after today, just call our office. We'll have a technician come by and try to understand why you're getting that buildup. I really couldn't tell you.
Over here. Hi, I'm Barbara Allen. I live in HOA 1. I've been there 10 years now, a couple different houses. Before I lived here in the Sonoran Desert, I lived in the Mojave Desert in Palm Springs, and we were very careful about not watering our yard, our sidewalks, our streets, because it was against the rules in Palm Desert. And we could easily have a rule here that says we could not waste water that way. When it's running down the street, and maybe it's coming from somebody's swimming pool, you got to report that. You got to tell somebody, can't waste water like that. We only have a limited amount of it. But when they change the rules here, couldn't they put a note in the Saddlebrook News or whatever the newspapers are? I don't read those inserts that come with all those bills. I just throw them away and pay my bill. But if you put something in there that says, oh, now we can have rainwater catchment. I didn't know that. Maybe I would have done that if I had known that last year. But put something in a newspaper that somebody reads, that, here's a new rule, or here's a new thing that you can do, or maybe there's something you can do with your washer and your dryer to conserve. Some suggestions would really be a good idea, not something that comes in a bill that most people like me throw away.
Yes. Yes, education, like we said when we started out, information is power. And good education, good communication is critical. We try to use as many avenues and channels as we possibly can. And even when, like this program today, we had great attendance, but I still bumped into a couple folks who said, the water what? And I mean, we have been out there promoting this for weeks. So people will read the paper, but they might not read the paper. They will read an email, but they might not read an email. So we'll try to do some additional communication, which I think is a very valid point. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, thanks for the presentations. And I just had a question. I mean, when I think of wasted water, what I think of is someone who is emptying their pool out into the street, and we've seen it multiple times. Are there other alternatives to dumping the water out onto the street? Are there companies that recycle the pool water and clean it and send it back? I don't know, but there should be. That seems like that'd be a real opportunity to help preserve our water.
That would be very expensive to come and try and catch individual pool discharges and do something with it. That would be some of the most expensive water around. The best thing to do is try and reuse that water on the property in passive, in passive collection and infiltration. That's probably the best thing that can be done, is just keep it on the property and use it and not let it run down the street.
And when you talk about homeowner associations, or if you were in an incorporated city or town, you'd be in a different situation, or you talk about living in a county that may have rules and regulations on low water use landscaping, it comes back to that slide I went over really quickly at public values, because a lot of people would argue have fewer individually owned swimming pools and instead have more community pools and so forth. But that's an individual thing. If people choose to put that in their homes, and unless there's something that changes that, we will see water used in ways that some people think isn't the best way to use it.
Yeah.
So it all, depends upon the rules and regulations. In Las Vegas, for example, which Las Vegas had very high consumption, they actually have a statewide law about ornamental landscaping not being able to use potable water supplies. I think it's I don't know the exact wording. And they also have limited, probably this would not be relevant to people here, the size of new swimming pools. So things can change over time.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more over here. Oops, sorry.
Occasions that Saddlebrook 1 and 2 are in much better shape for water rights than like Saddlebrook Ranch. Do they get their water from a different source than we do?
Nope. It's all coming out of the same aquifer.
Okay, so if you're here or Saddlebrook Ranch, your future water is basically going to be the same scenario. Okay.
Yeah,
All
there isn't any water being imported into the area from outside of the area. So it's all coming out of the same aquifer.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Quick thing, if there could be some education on pool water. I have a pool and it's new to me, and I understood that you couldn't discharge anywhere but the street as far as the HOA was concerned. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but I do know that it's chlorinated water, and I don't necessarily want to put it on my plants in the yard. But it would be great to have some education of a way to keep it on the property and not have a wash under the foundation, or because it's quite a forceful flow, and to be able to put it on the plants or not put it on the plants. I did look into using the pool as an emergency in case of the Armageddon. You can't drink that, and there's no way to clean it enough so that you can drink it once
Okay.
it's chlorinated. Thanks.
Thank you. Very good suggestion. We will incorporate that in the communications coming forward. We have time for one more question, and then we got to let our speakers go.
Thank you. Shepard, could you elaborate a little bit on what lines that are going to be replaced with copper?
Are you asking which units will be replaced with copper?
Yeah, I'm involved with 3 communities up in Colorado, and we're replacing them all with polyethanol. We're ripping out the copper because it's so expensive, or any new development are not using copper. So I guess I have a question in my mind: why copper? And what lines are they? The main lines, lateral lines from the meters up to the houses?
These are your service lines. So it's not the main lines. It's the service lines going from the main line to your home. And we're going to be focused
to the home or to the meter.
To the home, or I'm sorry, to the meter, from the main line to the meter. Right, and we're focusing on the older units first. Wherever we see that there's older lines is where we're going to start.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Thank you, Wally.
Yeah.
what they're talking about is a service line. So there's a trunk distribution line in the street, and then they come off of that to the meter. And copper is the industry standard for longevity, flexibility, serviceability, and in fact, copper from the meter to the house is kind of the preferred industry standard over polyethylene. As the earth changes and shifts, polyethylene can crack, it ages, and is more susceptible to age. Plastic. Anything plastic is highly susceptible to age that copper is much more resilient to, and it doesn't introduce a water quality issue in the long term. So copper is kind of the standard for service lines.
Okay, we've got one more burning question. She will not go away until I have her up to the microphone.
Thank you very much. When we have a leak in our system, why do we have to wait until our bill comes out that we find that we have a leak in our system? Isn't there any way you can alert us that all of a sudden our rates are going up?
As of now, the only way that we know that you have a leak is when we look at your usage. If it looks abnormally high from the month before, that's our red flag. If we have a better system, like the AMR meter systems that we're trying to move towards, we can monitor it better and possibly catch it sooner. But right now, that's just all we have to work with. We see that your usage is up high, and we go and investigate it and try to help you figure out if it's a leak. That's basically just where we start. We can only go off of your meter readings and just seeing that your usage is abnormal, and then we go and get all the details we can and try to figure out what caused it. Sometimes it's a one-time spike when you had extra company over, or we've seen cases where people leave hoses running on accident, and sometimes there is a leak. And we can't always tell you exactly where it's at. We can just tell you that, yes, we've observed there's a leak being detected here, and just try to help you understand that as best as we can.
Start with your toilet flappers.
Oh, I have brand new toilets.
Well, you see that?
No, I had a leak twice and was never alerted until I got my bills. And then I called and said, oh yeah, you probably have a leak.
There are, and I'm sorry to hear that, and that's what I say we try to look out for. We monitor thousands of accounts monthly, and unfortunately, we might miss one or two sometimes. It doesn't look good on us, and I'm sorry if that happened in your case, but we do, I'm sorry.
There are companies out there that are selling to individual household systems, and then you have a phone app and it alerts you if you've got some spike in your utilization or so forth. So that's out there, but that's on you to go pay for that. But there are companies that are selling that.
I've got one on my meter.
Me too.
And I'm a Tucson Water customer.
I have one too.
So it tells me.
Yeah, and I just have to say, I told Wally quietly, I actually had a broken meter at my house that I had no usage. And the first month I thought, oh, it's just a mess, mix up. But the second month, I had to call the utility, get a new meter put in, and then, of course, they had to back charge me for what was my estimated usage over that. So low readings that are wrong are also a problem.
All right. Well, let's give our speakers another round of applause. Thank you very, very much for coming today. We are so appreciative of our speakers, and it's been a great program.